Good morning, everybody. It's Saturday morning with coffee and pan Dulce, and we are rocking and rolling. We have a special guest, Dr. B, with us, and of course, our host and producer, Christine Cano.
What a great song to come into. So, wow, this is, especially to be on the Starship and to come into this Alexa stuff. Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to Coffee and Pan Dulce. Today is Saturday, April the 18th. What day is it? April 18th already. Day 30-something of many people's stay-at-home order. I want to welcome you to Coffee and Pan Dulce, those who are joining us on Facebook Live, but also the people who join us on YouTube later and also on Facebook as well. And once again, thank you all the people who are watching us on the back cameras, on camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. Last week wasn't as busy on camera 1. It was only 2,000 people who watched it. The week before, it's now up to 5,000. I don't know what's going on there. But welcome, everyone. So let's start. Unfortunately, Mama Ruth is under the weather this morning, so I'm not sure if she's going to be able to join us in. She was having a hard time talking.
She doesn't have corona, does she?
Well, I think she's got Dos Equis, but, you know.
That's better. That only lasts 2 weeks.
Exactly. So let's go around. If you're looking at your screen, everyone's screen looks differently. We've got our co-host Jenny-Jaymes Gunn, and then Dr. B, and of course, baby Trump Pinata is with us again for the 5th show in a row. So, Jenny, introduce yourself and tell us your imaginary button.
Well, my imaginary buttons would be I'm the National Organization of Women. I'm a board member of that, and then also, if I had another button, it would be with Charlotte Pride. I'm an LGBT activist and organizer for Charlotte Pride, and a coordinator for Real Out, which is our film festival that we've now moved to October, and also Charlotte Trans Pride, because I am a transgender woman.
Excellent. And if you're looking at the Brady Bunch screen, go on mine, you're on the bottom left, but sir?
Yeah, I'm George Bohmfalk. I'm a retired neurosurgeon living here in Charlotte, and my main button, of course, is Medicare for All. But you mentioned that the Humane Society is going to be on next week's show. I saved a life this morning. I saved a little baby goose whose foot got tangled up in some fishing line down near a pond. And I'm not sure he's going to completely get back in the swing, but at least he's got a chance now. So that's my heroic move for the weekend.
Yes. Yes.
You know, that's interesting you say that, Dr. B, because Ruth about a week ago texted me and said that in where she lives, there are some neighborhood warnings to be careful of geese, because I guess this is the time of year when they were laying their eggs and they're around. And apparently if you get too close to their eggs, they'll attack you.
Oh, yeah.
So I told her, I said, if you get that on video.
Yeah, no, they are extremely protective, and they're in a pond right behind our apartment. So we've been able to watch this whole process of the eggs laying and the mother sitting on them for a month. And they just hatched out, I guess, Wednesday or Thursday. And got pictures of them going for their first little swim. And it's really been fun. And so we were worried that one of them got predated this morning, but it was just good old human casualness, leaving fishing line in the water. And miraculously, I actually kind of had my little clippers and was able to free him up. So that was really
that's like one of those. That's like one of those Saturday morning wildlife shows that.
Exactly.
Listen, we do want to thank our Coffee Pan Dulce sponsor once again. It's Manolo's Bakery. Manolo's Bakery is on Central Avenue. They, as you know, once again, they still have takeout. You can still get there and order pastries, pan dulce, breads, tres leche cakes, tamales. You can order one of their meals. I've had, I think, 2 or 3 of their meals already. And you know, once again, with each meal, you get a tres leche cake, which just in itself is a lot. And I actually had to give one to someone else because I couldn't eat all that tres leche cake. So I do want to thank them. And also, if you do have your glass, let's go ahead and toast to coffee and pan dulce. So, there we go. Cha-ching, cha-ching. So today I'm trying something new. There was a Lucasfilms, which is now owned by Disney. They released these virtual backgrounds for people who are doing Zoom, Skype, WebEx, all those meetings. and they're giving you the pictures for free, I think for a week, and there's like 20 of them. So I decided to do it from this. There's a name for each one of them. And if you're a Star Wars fan, I guess you're supposed to recognize all these backgrounds. So I've decided to do it from, I think this is not the control panel. Anyway, so I decided to do it from that one, which is, I'm sure, going to be annoying to some people.
I think it's hilarious.
It is. And, I had the toilet paper roll last week and then the empty shelves. So this week I've decided to try this one. I know we want to talk about the coronavirus and the reopen groups, and I'm sure there's other things that, if you guys want to talk to those as well. It does look like our neighbor Barbara Bacon is trying to sign in a couple of times, so we will just see when she's able to get in here. There she goes. Hello, Miss Barbara. How are you? I'm not sure if her audio is working.
May not be there yet
today. Yep. Well, so Dr. B, there was a doctor / congressperson from North Carolina that was on WCNC, the NBC affiliate here yesterday, and he was talking about reopening and the big reopen movement and so forth. And some of the suggestions he was making were restaurants should reopen, but limit their customers to every other table. Hair salons, everyone else should reopen. So basically he was saying everyone should reopen. It's just everyone would just wear a mask. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I have a feeling the reopen rallies, which I think is they are like the Tea Party was in 2009 when those rallies started, for those who remember those. That's what these are like, except instead of the issue being Medicare or the Obamacare Affordable Care Act or the bank bailouts, now it's the reopen. It's almost, they're all Trump supporters, basically. So do you have anything you want to add, talk about that?
Yeah, I think that reflects everybody's impatience. I mean, everybody's getting cabin fever, and we're thinking, well, people aren't dropping like flies here in Charlotte area, so let's kind of open up. My fear is that impatience might get the best of us, and I'm just concerned that we're not seeing terrible things like in New York because we just haven't gotten there yet. And everybody can look at these graphs that go along real slowly and all of a sudden they pick right up. And I think we may be kind of still over on this part. And this morning we have 24 total deaths in Mecklenburg County, I understand, and like over 1,000 cases. Well, follow the graph. It's going to perk along like that. And then I fear it's going to kind of go high. So if we start expanding and getting everybody back to work right now, when it gets over here, it's going to be unnecessarily high. So once again, I think we just need to be a little bit more patient and stick this out. There's a great meme on Facebook that probably most of y'all saw that they say, just because things have slowed down, and say, oh, therefore we ought to open them up. It's kind of like saying, oh, this parachute slowed my descent down, so let's disconnect from it. I think we just need to wait till we reach the ground, kind of go a little farther. Give another couple, 3, I don't know exactly how many weeks. Let's just watch the numbers. I think it would just be premature to open things up. I'm just real sorry because I'm as impatient as everybody else. The other thing that Representative Murphy mentioned in his comments was things like spas and haircut places and a couple of restaurants. Those are big, but that's not the biggest part of the economy. So even doing that wouldn't accomplish much, I don't think, and would probably expose a lot of folks to unnecessary risks. So I think we need to, again, pay attention to the scientists, not necessarily, he is a physician, he's a urologist, so he's obviously very smart. But he's not a public health expert. And I think we need to pay attention to Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and look at the numbers and be patient and go with their advice. This will pass, but if we get in too big a hurry, I think we're gonna regret it. So.
And I think it's really bizarre that the Republican Party is so disjointed on this, because you look at the example of Texas, for example, and you got Governor Abbott that has canceled school for the year, and he's as conservative as you get.
Yeah, for sure.
And very much a Southern Democrat or a Southern Republican. And they preemptively have done a lot of measures that was more in line with the Democrats. And yet you've got people up in Michigan with armed to the teeth with Trump Pence signs standing on the state capitol, basically threatening, the government and saying, you all reopen or we're going to, exercise our Second Amendment rights. You have the president tweeting, use your Second Amendment rights, which is, to me, if you're saying you liberate a state, and he knows, and he quotes the Second Amendment, is that not treason? Is that not high treason when he's inciting violence against governors that happen to be Democrats? To me, that's insane and irresponsible.
Interesting you say that, Jenny. Last night, about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, the Washington Post published online an op-ed basically saying what you're saying, is that what the tweets that he did actually is against the law. And the case the person who was writing that made was exactly what you said. That the Supreme Court has said your freedom of speech ends when it incites violence. And
especially the president.
Yes.
You're talking about the commander in chief. I mean, you're talking about the head of the military, and now he's inciting essentially civil war.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said. He said, you should encouraging groups to armed insurrection against state capitals. And he named the 3 state capitals of Virginia, Michigan, and Minnesota. That's insane. That is completely and totally irresponsible. We need a calmer voice. We do, like Dr. B says, we need patience, we need compassion, and we need to ride this storm out, not say, oh, use your Second Amendment rights and go shoot things. I'm like, come on, we don't need that.
In terms of, kind of what the president has said, I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that that'll be received like the preposterous things he says that largely kind of ignored. So, I'm not too concerned with that. Like you say, I really wish people would tone down their rhetoric a little bit, because that doesn't help anybody. It is bizarre with these protests in these states. I can just hope that reason will prevail, but people get impatient. They do kind of some crazy things. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see over the next few weeks, kind of how this plays out.
I do think, because I remember the Tea Party days, when all of that started to break out. I had a really good friend of mine at that time. I was living in Plano, Texas, and when it was starting to break out, a friend of mine, I was playing softball in a softball league, and he did marketing, and the Tea Party in Texas had hired him to promote these rallies, and they were calling Tea Party rallies. And he was telling me about this as he was promoting it. And I think the Koch brothers were funding an organization that was helping them coordinate and organize. And I remember he was telling me that the funds that were behind these rallies, they were putting, they told him, whatever you needed, as much money, there were thousands and thousands of dollars they were doing to promote these tea parties. And that's exactly what it seems like is occurring now. That, once, I think I said last week or whatever, that in politics, chaos and a crisis is your best friend. And I do believe that the Republicans are, specifically a lot of the people who have been so silent for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks, that they have just been kind of like waiting for just something to do. And this is how they're going to release their energy. And so I don't see this as going away. I see it as being built. I know that my congressperson, and I think it's probably yours as well, Jenny, Dan Bishop, Bathroom Dan Bishop, he tweeted yesterday or the day before that he's going to be joining these rallies in Raleigh, either Monday or Tuesday. And so they see this as an opportunity to kind of clatch on to something. And so I don't think they're going to go away. I think they're going to get bigger. And that's going to, we'll see how people react to that. Anybody want to comment?
Well, speaking of using a crisis and taking advantage of it, some of us view this moment as possibly be an opportunity to advance the issue of Medicare for all, because we have millions of people not only losing their jobs, but they're also losing their employer provided healthcare insurance. And so suddenly we have millions of more people going onto the uninsured rolls. And the question is not only how can they get treatment if they have COVID related illness, but what about anything else? What if they fall down and break a leg? And so there's a proposal that, God willing, will be attached to this next relief bill that they're currently fighting about, or as a separate issue. And it'll probably be jointly sponsored in the Senate by Bernie and in the House by Washington State, Seattle Representative Pramila Jayapal, a provision to basically put everybody who's uninsured, including those 30 so million who've been uninsured for a long time, and the millions who are going to become uninsured because they lose their jobs, to put them on Medicare and to eliminate deductibles and copays, because if you don't have a job, you can't afford deductibles and copays, and to provide, prescription drugs because you can't afford those either. So that would essentially be the structure of Medicare for all for these uninsured people who lose their jobs because of the pandemic as well. And so we're looking at that as a possible opportunity in this crisis. And I think, for myself, I'm going to try to focus on that and just for the moment try to ignore these folks who are using the crisis otherwise as an opportunity to do crazy things like raid their state capitals and stuff.
I mean, I think that's a great point, Dr. B. I mean, I think COVID has showed what a lack of safety net and infrastructure our country really has. And
yeah, for sure.
Had we had Medicare for all in place, if we had proper testing and we'd done all the things that previous experts have been saying for about 20 years, including a UBI as well, we wouldn't have to worry about stimuluses and things like that. You wouldn't have people trying to force a reopen. You wouldn't have people tearing each other apart for resources. Even Hawaii has a UBI in their state. And the reason they did it is because it's financially become unlivable for so long because of heavy and foreign investment and things of that nature. And it makes sense. And instead of raising...
Jenny, what is UBI?
What now?
What is UBI?
Universal Basic Income. So it's basically Social Security for all, where it gives you a basic income. And especially in crises like this, where if you had a basic income, you wouldn't even be, people wouldn't be scrambling for resources. So especially your bottom 85% of the income brackets, to where they didn't have the money, the resources to just wait this out. And now, so we've had to do all these emergency efforts like, higher unemployment pay, the $1,200 stimulus. If you had a UBI, you wouldn't even have to talk about that. And it makes sense. So, and just like Medicare for all.
So what you're saying sounds like socialism.
Well, I mean, not to put too fine of a point of it. Yeah, I mean,
socialist.
The word. Yeah, I know. And the link between socialism and communism is so crazy. But I mean, the reality is that we need an economy and also a structure. We're such a big country. We're such a diverse country. Speaking of economic terms and everything else, we're going through a transition of going from a completely solid state country to a cyber country anyway. And we have for the last 20 or 30 years since the birth of the internet and the Google machine and everything else. And one of the things is there's going to be extremes and gaps in the economy. And that's why you see large spread homelessness and things like that as we transition, just like when we transitioned from the Gilded Age to the modern age. There was a lot of problems with our economy then too. And then we started passing all kinds of Sherman antitrust laws and everything else, because we wanted to protect the people too. And this is another time where we need Medicare for all desperately. We need to make sure we're protecting the most affected, honestly.
Yeah, there's some interesting charts that y'all have probably seen too that compare us and our response to the pandemic to other countries that had these social safety net kind of things to a greater degree than we do. And of course, a lot of folks on the other side will say, well, you know, Italy had universal health care and all that, and look at they're having a terrible problem. Well, you know, sure, that's a simplistic answer. There's a whole lot of reasons kind of why some countries with single payer systems or universal healthcare systems still have suffered in the midst of this crisis. That does not eliminate the benefit that we could have and the advantages if we had such a system, and the other safety nets like, you know, childcare and possibly a universal basic income. And, you know, Christian, you appropriately raise a cry that so many people do, is socialism. And again, I enjoy seeing these folks kind of say, well, if you take that $1,200 check with Trump's signature on it, isn't that socialistic? You know, you're taking government money. So it all kind of becomes silly when you wrap that label of socialism. And I think we just need to be all a little bit more calmer about discussing that.
So three things I want to ask. I was writing, as you guys were speaking, I was writing some notes here. The first thing is, Dr. B, what type of glasses do you have that they don't reflect in the Zoom camera? I couldn't put my contacts.
Let me do an advertisement for the world's least expensive glasses. I don't know which one of the big box stores these came, but they do reflect. I just don't have a whole lot of direct front light.
Oh, I see.
They do reflect. Yeah, it's just a trial and error placement of the light. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Because this morning I woke up and my allergies were bothering me. I couldn't get my contacts in, so I had to put my glasses on, and the glasses reflect, you know, the light here. So that was the first question. The second question is
a critical question in these days of Zoom.
Yes. So a very good friend of mine, a young man who is a very good friend. He's about 30 years old. He works for an engineering kind of construction kind of company. And he told me, we were talking about Medicare for all, and he told me that if we had a Medicare for all system, that everyone would just want healthcare. This is kind of his explanation, and that he has worked very hard for his benefits, and people who work hard should be able to get the benefits, and the freeloaders should not get the benefits. That is actually his understanding of how the healthcare system, health insurance system works. So I try to explain to him, even if you don't have health insurance, you still are part of the healthcare system, just someone else has to pay for it. And so I couldn't exactly verbalize the point that a universal healthcare insurance system, I don't know, and maybe you can explain this, would that put more burden onto the healthcare system, doctors, hospitals, and so forth?
Yeah, that's great questions that are very central to this whole discussion about Medicare for all. The first thing, would everybody want it? You know, I'm on Medicare for a long time until I dropped it. I had a Medigap policy, so I had zero first dollar coverage. I could go get a flu shot, or I could get a heart transplant, and it wouldn't cost me a nickel, you know, because I was paying these premiums. Did I go to the doctor? No, for years I didn't go to the doctor. I went for, you know, maybe annual checkups every year or two, but it's not like I was willy-nilly flopping in there because it was, you know, kind of free to me. And when people say free in a Medicare for all type program, it's not free any more than fire departments and police and highways and libraries, all these other kind of social goods, common community goods we all pay for. How do we pay for them? In taxes. And the poor people who can't afford taxes don't pay as much as the Koch brothers, you know, hopefully, you know, pay more. It's a progressive kind of thing. And everybody seems, you know, fine with that because we understand it and it makes sense. Now, healthcare should have been included in that eons ago, but for a whole lot of reasons it wasn't. So now healthcare has kind of gotten carved out as a special thing that people in the conservative ranks kind of feel like you ought to pay for it. Well, we can dismiss that as just being mean and cruel and not very empathetic. But I've come to understand that it's a core moral principle of folks on the conservative side that you shouldn't get things that you don't pay for. And that applies to a bunch of different aspects of life. They have kind of conceded that, okay, well, yeah, it's better for the community if everybody has fire protection, because otherwise your house might cause my house to burn down, and that'd be kind of stupid, wouldn't it? By the same token, I hope that before long, maybe in this crisis, more folks of the conservative mindset will see, well, it's not very smart for you to have COVID as my neighbor because you couldn't afford to go get tested. And therefore, you know, when we talk across the fence, you're giving it to me because, you know, you didn't have the money to find out. So they might come to realize that healthcare is a common good. It's a common benefit that helps everyone. And so therefore this notion that, well, I paid for it and therefore you have to pay for your own healthcare, and why should I pay for your healthcare? Maybe that's antiquated. Maybe that's kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face. And maybe the crisis will bring more people to kind of realize we're all in this together. And whether it's, you know, you giving me COVID or you giving me tuberculosis or strep throat or any of a number of other things that might not happen if we all had access to healthcare and could get treatment for these things, maybe there'll be a change in the conversation. And so that may be a silver lining to this, that folks will kind of come to realize we need something like universal healthcare.
Jenny, you want to add something there?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I equate what's going on with the shutdown and the quarantine to the beginning of World War II, and where we had to really mobilize and rethink how our government plays a role in our lives. Like we had gas rationing, we had, you know, curfews, we had basically martial law, you know, to protect the country. We even had, you know, they turned the lights off at a certain time to make sure Japanese bombers and German bombers couldn't, you know, it'd be, I mean, because this was pre-satellite days, you know, to where we were protected. So we're protecting all of society by making very structured decisions. We retooled, you know, manufacturing plants. And it's kind of that same thing. We got invaded by COVID. It's basically like Pearl Harbor, and it showed the weaknesses in our society. So we need basic structures in place that show what we don't have and what we desperately need. And when you get into that situation, I think even the most conservative people are agreeing to, you know, doing better for all. I mean, basically medical care is a utility. It is a societal utility, just like electricity.
Well, I tried to explain to him because I've heard that kind of concern, and I don't think he's that out of the ordinary. And people who, and I shared with him growing up in my family, and especially a lot of more blue collar working type of families. You're told, get this job because it has great benefits. Get this job because it has, you know, that's really kind of what motivates people. And when you're raised in a family that probably has more resources, the benefits aren't as important as enjoying the job. And because of these benefits that are tied to this job, it really limits, or it has limited, the amount of opportunities that people will take because they need the benefits. And I always give the example of my mom back in the 70s. I remember she was working for Montgomery Wards in a very hostile work environment, and she stayed with that job because she needed the health insurance for us kids. And so there are people who are tied to jobs, and the reason they're tied to that job is specifically because they need that insurance. I also explained to him that I pay my premium for my Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think is $800, $900 a month. Somewhere around there. So regardless of if the person who lives next to me has no health insurance at all, we still have to pay if that person has to go to the hospital. Someone has to pay for that. So it's not like no one's paying. I'm paying in hidden taxes, whether it's county taxes or rise in my premium to offset that person not having insurance. And so even if someone doesn't have insurance, we're paying for it, just like I have car insurance. The reason we require everyone to have car insurance is to spread the risk. So that was my explanation. But Dr. B, I don't know.
No, that's brilliant. Exactly what you pointed out, and it's a double whammy. And I think folks don't appreciate that. It's a double whammy because folks are going to get the needed care, the urgent care with car wrecks and, you know, heart attacks and stuff like that. They're going to come in, and you and I are paying for it, and we're paying for it in the most expensive way by people coming to the emergency room at the last minute rather than being able to go to a doctor or clinic and maybe get some medicines to take care of the problem before it becomes that urgent. So that's the one. Oh God, there's so many aspects of that. So they're getting inappropriate care as an expensive emergency. That's also reducing their productivity, right? So they probably got sicker and sicker and had to quit their job, whether it's mowing your lawn or doing your hair or serving you in a restaurant or something more, white collar. So there's that. And then at the same time as what I mentioned before, a lot of them may have illnesses that are being transmitted to us in the grocery store line and whatnot because they didn't have access to that. So it's very short-sighted. It's very, again, I go back to this cutting off your nose to spite your face. You kind of have this moral principle that, oh, they ought to kind of earn it and I shouldn't have to pay for it. And it's like, well, who's really losing? You are. Yes. We all are. Your mother's example is great. This job lock is terrible. And another thing I never really thought about before, there's another lock, and it's called marriage lock. And there's any number of folks that stay in relationships because of the health insurance. Of course, that's a very complicated issue too. But I saw two papers that blew my mind. One is that when couples get on Medicare, when they turn 65, the divorce rate goes up, because folks are no longer stuck in these relationships. And that similarly in abusive relationships, if someone finds insurance, then they leave the abusive relationship. So, we have job lock, we got marriage lock, a lot of negative, destructive reasons that people are staying in harmful jobs and relationships because of the simple matter of not having access to health insurance.
Well, and that's kind of, and what you're saying is in the concern that my friend had, I think highlights that the Medicare for All movement, improved Medicare for All movement, whether it's whoever is pushing it, we have to do a better job of messaging these, whether it's 30-second commercials or social media clips or whatever, we have to do a better job of marketing and messaging it, because I do believe if we did get that message out, that people would say, you're right. I mean, I took this job because of benefits, but I really didn't want that job. I really wanted this job. And, I think that we have an opportunity to work on that messaging. And the Republicans, and to their point, I've said this all the time, Republicans do a really good job of marketing and messaging. They do a really, we as a Democrat, I'm a Democratic Libertarian, Democrats always play catch up in trying to explain what someone else is saying instead of get in front of the curve. Jenny, I know you and I have had that conversation before.
Yeah, well, and two, and I harken back to the New Deal, because where we're at right now is very similar to the New Deal era and what President Roosevelt did. And he did some very unique things. He identified our major problems and our infrastructure problems, such as electrification and the REA. And now there's nobody sitting around, Republican or Democrat, gnashing their teeth about the socialistic program of the REA and electrifying America. Or President Eisenhower, that was a Republican, that did the Interstate Commerce Act and expanded our interstate highway program, because he identified a problem during World War I and World War II of transportation needs. Two huge socialism programs that individuals can't build highways, they can't build power plants, they can't string power lines through, from state to state to state. And both these programs streamlined and gave universal electricity to all 50 states. And they gave a highway system to all 50 states. And it removed it from the state and the local burdens for a reason, made our country more effective. Probably had a big thing to do with the boom. It wasn't really the baby boomers nearly as much as the infrastructures of electrification universally, even in the rural areas, and transportation. So to go into the modern era, we definitely need, as the only developed nation in the Western world without universal health care, is shameful and stupid and very short-sighted.
Let me comment. As you mentioned, the interstate highway system, whatnot, and that was done as the defense move. What that brings to mind is that a lot of conservatives, we all have our moral pillars, and progressive liberals tend to kind of think more of fairness and caring and equality and touchy-feely things like that. And conservatives tend to think about, strength and protection and the country and all that. So we need to frame things better. And like you say, Republican conservatives have been much better at framing issues. That's just their expertise. And what happened to Hillary, and to extent what happened to Elizabeth Warren, they all had these great plans. They could sit there and talk your ears off about the details. What was missing? The passion, the moral play, that kind of say, this is what we need to protect the country, be the shining city on the hill, like Reagan talked about. So maybe we can talk about Medicare for all as being a defense move. We need to protect the country with Medicare for all by protecting everybody's health, and make it, kind of reframe it in these more conservative moral terms, which are legitimate perfectly. And maybe that would, open them, some of them, to considering that it's very protective, that it's going to strengthen the economy, it's going to strengthen the productivity of the workforce, and touch on these, reframing some of these issues in conservative terms, and appeal to the patriotic aspect about how strong it'll be for the country. But no, you're exactly right.
So we need the people who are supporting improved Medicare for all, we really need to we need to start a GoFundMe page to hire a good marketing and advertising team to get this passed. I've had this theory since the start of this show back in November of 2018. Jeff Scott, who's one of our co-hosts, who's a libertarian, and we've heard him speak. We've heard Republicans speak, and Jenny, you and I have talked many times as well. But I have realized that the shift back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and maybe even the 80s, public education was very important to many people at the local level. And if you look at the history of Charlotte, public education, the North Carolina has always taken the public education system. They're very proud of the public education system. It wasn't until people started to not look like them that they realized it's not as important as so when people look like yourself, you tend to support helping the other person. But when the person doesn't look like you, and specifically brown or black people, when they start to become a part of the public education system, and then I've noticed the attitudes change where, well, we need to have school choices, we need to have vouchers. And so what I've noticed, and especially here in Charlotte, and I'm sure other cities and states are like this as well, the same people that were so adamant about quality public education, high schools and so forth, it was okay when everyone looked like them. But as the community started to look more diverse and not like them, they became, I don't want to pay for them. And so there is an underlining bit of, I don't necessarily know if that's racism. It's more, I guess that would be bigotry.
Tribal,
or
call it tribal.
Yes, and I do notice that. And the reason I said that, because Jeff Scott makes a very good point as a libertarian. He said in his home, he's a socialist. At the county level, he's but I don't know if I'm saying that right. Is that right, Jenny? Isn't that what he says? He said,
I don't know, that sounds perfect.
Yeah, and he said he's a libertarian nationally, state-wise he's a Republican, city-wise he's forgot, and at home he's a socialist. And it is a very interesting. So anyway.
Well, I think that's brilliant, and that probably speaks volumes to a lot of people's views on things. If you're with people and you empathize and you share their problems, you're going to want to kind of help. I think that I'm very grateful for you saying that. I've never thought of it in those terms. How as your circles change, your perspective changes. Isn't that interesting? I love that.
I also think it's if it affects you directly. One of the reasons I'm anti-war and a pacifist is because my dad fought in Vietnam and lost his left foot and his lower left leg. And so growing up with a wounded warrior greatly changed my perspective on war, versus somebody that maybe did not grow up with a wounded warrior and their dad was an accountant or a nurse or a doctor or something that wasn't, on combat front lines. And I think when it affects you, and I think this is why some Republican governors are disagreeing with Trump and these reopen people, is that they're going, like Governor Abbott, for example, he is bound to a wheelchair. You
Yep.
could say that he may have a compromised immune system or have a family member with a compromised immune system and goes, I've got a dog in this hunt. I've got a grandchild. I've got something. And you know what? I don't care what the conservatives think. I'm going to shut down the schools. I'll shut down everything to protect my family. And I think some people with rational minds, no matter what their ideology or morality is seeing this as a legit threat to our national security. If half of the country has COVID and half of our military has COVID, we got problems. We got some serious problems. That could be another opportunity. And, and I think you're right, Dr. B. I think framing it as a national defense strengthening the country infrastructure type deal changes the argument. And it really is. I mean, we've, as a nation, we've rallied many times in our history and built huge infrastructures to forward our country into the next century. And it's time. We fooled around for 20 years in this century, not really doing anything. Except going and invading Iraq and Afghanistan. We spent $6.4 trillion doing that. We sure as hell can spend a little bit of money on our medical system.
Well, Jenny, as you remember, Dr. B, you remember on this show right now, I had talked about how what I hoped what come out of this crisis is what came out of the 9/11 crisis. After the 9/11 crisis, people started to really raise a level of people in the military to, in my view, more of a higher level than it needed to be. But we went through 19 years of saying, thank you for your service, thank you for your service, thank you for your service. And I believe that this crisis has changed that level to healthcare workers, scientists. Now we are actually thanking those people who are in the healthcare service industry, who go into medicine. So I hope that we'll have another 19 years, just like we did after 9/11, another one generation, 2 decades of people wanting to go into first responders, ambulance, healthcare services. And the reason I say that is because tonight on NBC, while you're at home, Lady Gaga is having a free concert with Jimmy Kimmel, I believe, and Colbert. They're doing a live stream 2-hour free concert. There's going to be Paul McCartney on there, and they're going to do a free concert for the public on live stream and also on NBC tonight. And I don't know the time. It may be at 7 or 8 o'clock on NBC time, but it is going to be occurring tonight. And there's going to be a lot of artists, and there's no charge for it, but you can donate to a fund that companies have donated to help healthcare workers, to help those kind of things. And so that is something that's happening tonight. And also, as we mentioned,
it's also on all 3 networks, by the way.
Yes.
Just to correct you, it's actually broadcasting live. It's never happened like that before, where it was a non-political event, and it's literally being simulcast with 3 hosts from 3 different networks. So it's kind of an interesting format.
It is.
Well, the only reason I push NBC is because I watch WCNC here only because we don't have cable. It's the only one that comes in really clear on my digital.
Oh, gotcha.
So ABC doesn't come in very clear here, and so I like Larry Sprinkle, the weatherman from on NBC. Also, a week from today, and we will have some of the people from the Humane Society of Charlotte on our show on Wednesday. Petapalooza, which is generally a big festival every spring, it has gone virtual. And Petapalooza, for those who've been a part of it, I have been a part of it. They have a pet parade, and they have booths, and you can buy things for pets. It's to raise awareness of pet adoptions here in Charlotte. Well, that's occurring next Saturday, but it is going to be done virtually. So someone like me, we've joined it, and I'll be walking with my dog as many people around the city to help raise money around our block for the Humane Society. And we'll have someone on the show on Wednesday to talk about it. And so you can donate to someone who is walking, or you can sign up and walk yourself. Because I like the t-shirt. So I'm doing it. Plus, of course, I'm a huge dog person. And then lastly, Beerly Funny, who was on our show about a week ago, they had their first virtual comedy show on Thursday night. Jenny, I saw you in the front row of the virtual comedy show. I bought 2
Yes.
tickets, and we bought some other people tickets. It was hilarious. And I had not realized how much I needed laughter like that, because after the show, my cheeks were so sore because I have not used this muscle in such a long time. And I was sitting there just going like this. And afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, my cheeks are so sore. And I'm wondering how many other people may not have been using that muscle for a while. So I believe they're having, Jenny, do you know, are they having another show on Thursday?
I will double check with Lauren, but I do believe that they're going to try to do a show every Thursday. And then also Pride, we're going to have 7 virtual shows. One will be comedy, and Lauren is going to be the host for that. And she's bringing in 4 LGBT comedians that we're going to live cast on Facebook Live. And so it's going to be really cool. We're going to have 6 other nights of entertainment. They're going to be 7 different theme nights. So one night will be a dance night. One night will be musicians. We have some fabulous acts lined up, and it'll be broadcast free of charge on Facebook Live. And the dates aren't quite set yet, but it'll be somewhere in the ballpark of May 1st. So coming up pretty soon.
Okay, well, I do want to thank the people. This is normally something Mama Ruth would do, but I do want to thank the people who have been watching us. Tara, hello, friend Tara, she's watching us. She said that color looks great on you. I said that when we started the show, so I just want to let you know. Lisa Tomisco, who actually is my sister from Tampa, Florida, is watching us. And I'm so sorry, Lisa, I always mutilate your last name. I just call her Sister Lisa. So she's watching us from Tampa. And some other individuals that are watching us as well. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Don't forget to share this show with your circle of friends. And you can watch us on YouTube later. For those who watch the show, you do know that you can watch it anytime, but also we repost the show on YouTube, and that goes at 7 o'clock every night after the show. And then once this social distancing finishes, we will have the ability to broadcast live on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube all simultaneously. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have that capability because of the platform that we're using. So I do want to say, because we only have about 7 more minutes left for the show, that in the question I have to Dr. B again, and I know we've asked this question before, and I don't know, because I've been hearing the doctors at the noon NBC, WCNC show that they have some doctors on there answering questions. Can someone give the virus to someone after they have recovered from the virus? Do we know that yet?
I don't think we know that yet. 2 things. Okay. First of all, there was a great study out of a New York obstetrical unit just last week that they decided, for a whole lot of reasons, to COVID test every lady, perfectly healthy, no symptoms, who came in to have their baby. About 14% asymptomatic, young, healthy, birth age, mothers were positive for COVID. Wow. If that translates to the whole population, if 14% of us are walking around with no symptoms and yet we have it, we have a bigger problem than people realize, which is why I think we need to keep up this social distancing and be a little more patient until we see how this plays out. That's huge. We've known that asymptomatic patients can spread it, but we just hadn't had that figure for 14% asymptomatic, people have it. On the flip side, after you get it and after you recover it, can you still transmit it? I think we still don't completely know. I think there have been some evidence that you can feel good and recover and still kind of be shedding the virus. So that would suggest to me that yes, you can still be spreading it after you think you're well. So I think we're going to have a refinement of all these figures about how many days before you become symptomatic, and then how long you're sick, and then how long afterwards you can still transmit it. We just need to stay tuned to all that and be vigilant.
I just had a brain freeze. What is it called whenever the doctor gives you like penicillin? What is that?
Well, antibiotic?
Antibiotic. Okay, antibiotic. Yes, antibiotic. The term you said.
Yeah.
So I heard someone say stopping the stay-at-home order right now would be like someone who's been prescribed antibiotics, and because they start feeling better, stops taking their antibiotics.
That's a pretty good analogy. Yeah.
You have to take all of them. If you don't take all of them, it doesn't work.
Comes right
And
back. Mm-hmm.
so I don't know, there was someone on Facebook that I saw, and they said that it's kind of like, to your parachute analogy, it's as if though if you're sick and you're taking your antibiotic and you start to feel better, and you don't take the last 3, if you had a Z-Pack or whatever you're using. Yeah. And so they use that analogy, and forgive me, Dr. B, because not everyone understands, what does symptomatic mean?
Okay. Yeah, a lot of these medical terms are getting tossed around, and people get confused by them. Symptomatic means you're having symptoms. There's, you're having fever, you feel bad, and achy and headache, and all those things are symptoms. So symptomatic just means that you're having some symptoms. So somebody who's asymptomatic means they don't have any symptoms. So with corona, we're finding out you can be sick and you can be transmitting it to other people and not have any symptom, being asymptomatic.
Okay, so when someone says there are people walking around with asymptomatic symptoms, they're saying they don't show any symptoms.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
people who are walking around asymptomatic can be making you sick. They don't know it. You don't know it, because they don't have symptoms yet.
I'm asking that question for Ruth, not because I don't know what it meant.
Yeah. You're asking for a friend.
Yes, that's right. I'm asking for a friend. So
it is a good clarification, because I think a lot of people are confused, because you know, like the flu, for example, when you get the flu, you usually start showing symptoms pretty much right away. I mean, you're sicker than a dog, and versus this, you can be basically like a ticking time bomb, just walking through the mall and touching things and licking doorknobs and getting everybody sick, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get it 14 days later. And I think that's why people were having a tough time understanding it, because they compared it to the flu for so long early on, like this was just some version of the flu. And even I misspoke and said this a few times, like, oh, it's not really that much worse than the flu early in March. And I wasn't really for shutting down everything until I started seeing some of the numbers and researching it, and I went, oh no, holy crap, this is different. This is something, the more I read about it, the more scared I got, the more I'm like, because I'm not a homebody, and I'm perfecty content keeping my happy little gay butt right here in this chair.
Yeah.
And I'm a hard socialite, social bug, and I'm telling you, as an extrovert, keep your ass home.
Yeah.
Keep your butt home.
Well, and this is, I think this pandemic is going to inform us so much, because we thought what you just said is right, that when you get the flu, you get asymptomatic. You don't know how many days you had the flu before you became asymptomatic, and we really probably haven't looked too hard at whether or not you could transmit it then. Because sure, there were people dying. Flu kills people every year, but not as many. It wasn't as communicable as this, and it wasn't novel, and people did have some degree of this herd immunity that everybody talks about. Yeah, that's another one of the many terms that's being bandied about with lack of total understanding of what they mean.
Well, I can tell you that, I often, when I'm bored, which is probably every night, I often look back at our archives of the shows that we've done. And I don't know if you remember, Jenny, back in February, we did a show where Jeff Scott brought the masks in. Do you remember that show?
Yes.
Okay. That was the first time we talked about the coronavirus on that show. And if you watch that show, and I watched it 2 days ago, we were saying things that now today we would look at and go, I can't believe I said that. And they weren't terrible, but we were saying things like, I don't know why people are worried about this and this. So we have, like you said, Jenny, you and I on that show, I'm really speaking about me. What I said during that show was not what I would say today. So I can tell you, even just within us, that show, if you watch that show, I think it's February, maybe even February 14th or whatever.
It was real. Yeah. And I think that's typical of life, though, is that life gives you the test before the lesson. And
Yeah.
we have gotten a major test in this country,
Yeah.
and a lot of us have gotten educated on things, and some of us maybe to the point where we think we're amateur doctors ourselves. You know, but
Dr. Phil.
yeah, your lifestyle is not conducive for what you're doing. But you know, I do believe that I agree with Dr. B. I think we need to listen to the scientists. We need to these people that are the boots on the ground that understand this and understand how contagions work. They're the ones that need to be leading the way.
Mm-hmm.
And when they say it's okay, then and they're in agreement consensus, then I think that's when we do it. But we've learned that knee-jerk reactions don't really work, you know, not based on science and fact. We need to stick to the science and the facts, especially on something like this, because we're playing with people's lives. You know, I don't want to lose a loved one because we bum rush a couple weeks early. And because like I've heard a lot of doctors say, we don't really know when the peak is until after the peak really regress.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you the conversation I've had with my friend, the one I was talking about, the Medicare for All, we've had this conversation before. And what I told him is I've noticed in the last 20 years, I'm 53, so probably after my 30s, I've realized that more and more Americans, because of social media, because of the internet, more and more Americans believe they're experts in everything. And they believe that they are smarter than the experts because they have access to information. What I reminded him is that the experts have the same more information than we do, so I still want to depend on the experts. And so I do find people today, whether it's Dr. Phil or people who are in the media, that it's almost like it's for many people, it's like it's a shame to their ego to admit that they don't know everything. And I do think the difference between, or at least I hope the difference between someone like Jenny and someone like President Trump is Jenny has the ability to say, hey, that's what I thought at the time. I've educated myself, and people like President Trump and his followers don't have the ability to say, I was wrong. And that, I think, is to me is the big danger, is we have people like President Trump in positions of leadership that don't have the ability to say, I was wrong, I've evolved, I've changed. And that, to me, those are the people that are very scary, because they would rather be right than do right. And as a result of that, there are many people that suffer. I know during the AIDS crisis, we had people that were so adamant, and as a result of that, those of us who lived through the AIDS crisis, I lived in fear every day. And I remember getting my very first AIDS test. It took about 10 days or a week to get your result in. I was like living in fear for that test. I remember you got it back and they said you're negative, and I'm like, I didn't really know what that meant. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was like I wrapped myself in a bubble wrap for like 5 years. It was, but anywho, I want to thank y'all for joining us. We have run out of time. Let's go around and tell us what's going to happen to you the next couple of days, and then we'll end the show. Jenny, we'll start with you.
I'm working on my entertainment projects with Pride and recruiting the last of the entertainers. That's my primarily thing, and hopefully the weather's good this weekend and I'm gonna get outside and do my daily walks. Other than that, I mean, people just need to stay safe, be patient with their neighbors, love thy neighbor.
Mm-hmm. Dr. B?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye on my little baby geese and hope no more of them get into trouble. And I'm going to be working on some activities with the PNHP, Physicians for a National Healthcare Program. And then Sunday, I'm going to be involved in a strategy planning session for a North Carolina statewide coalition of 25 or 30 diverse groups, unions, churches, gay and lesbian organizations, all who are gathering together to advocate statewide for a Medicare for all type universal healthcare system.
That's fabulous.
Well, thank you so much. I have changed my screen so we can go into warp speed. Is that Star Trek or is that Star Wars?
Well, warp speed is,
it's all of them, isn't it?
Yeah, I like all of them. I know that there are Trekkies and there's Star Wars. There's like a big, anyway. So we're going to end the show. I'm going to play this. So our panelists, please stay on, but we're going to end on Facebook Live here. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. We miss you, Mama Ruth. I hope you're feeling better. And thank you everyone who watched us and you're going to be watching us later. Don't forget to watch Lady Gaga tonight. I will be, and all the other entertainers on there. Alexa, play Pandora.
Mariachi Radio from Pandora.
All right. Thank you. Bye.